So time then for the day's business news on the programme. Ukraine, of course, is known as the breadbasket of Europe. Along with Russia, it is one of the world's largest cereal producers. But now the war is causing major disruptions. And Yuka Roy from our business desk is here. She's got more for us. Yuka.
Well, Stuart, prices of wheat have been surging in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war, of course, coming at a time inflation was already surging. Now, Russian Navy ships have been blocking cargo ships from Ukrainian ports, so that even last year's harvest can't leave the country. Ukrainian farmers are struggling to plant their crops as fierce fighting prevents them from accessing their fields. Catherine Viette takes a look.
Driving away from Mykolaiv, the country's southern farmlands can be seen from the road. They're now transformed into battlefields. Missiles are stuck in the ground, while the debris from Russian helicopters litter the fields. The fighting has made it difficult for Ukraine's farmers to carry out their work. While this wheat field was planted last November, that's not the case for the other parcels, which have yet to be seeded. However, gasoline is rationed in Ukraine and the farmer's tank is empty. Ukraine is the world's fifth largest exporter of wheat. Here are the country's major agricultural regions, many of which are currently affected by the ongoing fighting. Because of this, the Ukrainian government expects wheat production to fall by 30% this year, and that's not the only problem. These are the grain silos at the Mykolaiv port, where much of the wheat would be exported, but the port is completely shut down. Since the start of the war, wheat prices have increased by 70%, raising fears about food shortages in certain parts of the world.
Meanwhile, the world's major consumers of oil are set to tap further into their emergency stockpiles to offset lost supply from Russia. 30 members of the International Energy Agency have agreed to collectively release 60 million barrels of oil from their strategic reserves, on top of 180 million barrels announced by the United States last week. It will be the second coordinated release in a month by members of the IEA and only the fifth in the agency's history. The impact may be limited, though. Crude oil prices jumped to almost $140 a barrel in early March, despite a previous release by the IEA of 60 million barrels. And after that announcement, though, Brent crude fell about 5% to its lowest level in 3 weeks, but prices quickly started coming back up. Both Brent and the WTI currently up by 1.5%. The US Federal Reserve appears to be taking a more aggressive approach to fighting inflation that has risen to the highest level in 4 decades. Minutes from the central bank's policy meeting back in March, when it raised interest rates by 1/4 percentage point, show that policymakers are ready to start selling off bonds to the tune of $95 billion a month. The Fed holds some $9 trillion worth of Treasury or mortgage-backed bonds, half of which purchased since the coronavirus pandemic tanked the US economy back in March of 2020. The US dollar strengthened and global stocks retreated amid expectations of more rapid rate hikes by the US central bank. Tokyo's Nikkei dropped to its lowest level in 3 weeks. Other major Asian indices also down by around 1%, as you can see there. European shares, though, opened higher despite the hawkish signs from the Fed, except for the export-heavy London FTSE 100. Paris's CAC 40 up by more than 0.5 percentage point at the open. The South Korean electronics giant Samsung says it expects a 50% jump in quarterly operating profits thanks to high demand for memory chips. The estimate comes ahead of Samsung's detailed earnings report due at the end of the month. The first quarter of this year also saw strong sales of its Galaxy smartphones. Supply disruptions at a rival chip maker may also have been a contributing factor. Semiconductor chips account for about half of Samsung's total profits. That's it for business for now. Back to you, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Yuka. Yuka with Business on France 24.